Hi guys, my name is Itamar. I am a senior software engineer, and today I want to talk about one of my favorite frameworks, which is Angular. Angular is an amazing framework that gets, unfortunately, a lot of hate on the internet. So I'm going to talk about it from an average so someone from an average web development background. I'm not going to go too high level, and I'm not going to try to dumb it down. So the first thing we need to understand about Angular is a TypeScript based web application framework, right? So depending on your experience with web development, those words might mean something to you, or they might not mean anything to you. All right. So I'm just going to talk about it from a very average level, and just break down all these words and what they mean and how Angular is helpful. So, first, it was created by Google. So, with Angular, it is known for being scalable, robust, and having an amazing set of tool. Angular is often the choice for businesses. So a lot of businesses like Angular because it's very secure and it's very safe. Now, when I use the word secure and safe, I'm not talking about specifically cybersecurity, because Angular, React have, both are great for creating secure web applications. When I'm talking about safe and secure, is that Angular has a repeatable and very easy way to create amazing code that can be reused throughout your application. So I'm going to get into it a bit more and more as we go on. Now, this security and this safety does come at a cost. So if you're a hobbyist like myself and you just love creating websites for fun, Angular can feel very restricted because it's very opinionated and a lot of your freedom tends to go away when you're using Angular. I remember I tried to create a video game with Angular and I felt like I had very little freedom and it was very hard for me to create an Angular web based video game. But we'll talk about that and more and other things. So, the first thing I want to over is what the Angular documentation says about itself. So what the Angular documentation says, everything in Angular revolves around components, reusable modular UI elements that make your code easy to maintain and extend. With Angular's built-in tools, you can handle everything from routing and state management to forms and HTTP requests in a highly structured and efficient way. So, the way I like to think about Angular is kind of like Lego blocks. So you have Lego, and then you put in a block, and then you put in another block. So you have your main website. Then you'll have a form. Then you'll have a button, and you'll be putting in these blocks on top of each other. You put in your form. Then in your form there's a button, and then in the button there's something else, and that is components. Now these are reusable. So just because I created a form, I don't have to create it again. I can just use it somewhere else. Now, if in that other place I want the form to be a bit different, I can also add in, so I can add in inside the form an argument to say, hey, can you be slightly different? Can you be the color red? And then once Angular sees, well, once the component sees that I've put that argument true, um, has to be the color red. I can then make that component, that button, into the color red, right? So that is Angular in a nutshell. So then the question is why do we then use Angular, right? So a lot of the benefits of Angular that, or how I've described Angular, it might not be very clear what the benefits of using a component based structure is, which is fine. What we need to understand is the reason why someone would choose Angular over traditional HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, so just building a website with raw HTML and JavaScript, is because of the component based architecture. So, the component based architecture makes it easy just to create JavaScript, HTML, and CSS code and makes it repeatable and also makes it so your code isn't colliding with each other. A good example of this is, have you ever been writing, just HTML and CSS, and then what starts to happen is your CSS starts colliding with each other, you know? See, you set certain CSS rules and they start colliding with other CSS rules that you created in a different file. Well, with the component based architecture, that doesn't happen, right? So that's more of a minor reason because there are ways around that when you're not using a component-based architecture. But the main reason is raw JavaScript is too complicated to write, right? So if you just think about writing JavaScript, it's very complicated to write. DOM manipulation is very complicated, right? And it can get very messy, especially when you're working in a team, right? So this is why we use Angular, is because it simplifies the process of DOM manipulation, and it also simplifies our JavaScript and makes it each section smaller so we understand what's going on. So that is why we would use Angular over vanilla JavaScript. Now, the question will be, okay, there are a lot of frameworks out there that use a component based architecture. Vue.js, for example, uses a component based architecture. Svelte uses a component based architecture. Astro uses a component based architecture. So let's look into that. Why do we use Angular over all of those other frameworks? So to make this video a bit shorter, I'm not going to directly compare Angular uh, to the other frameworks that it's bigger than, because I don't think that's necessarily fair, because Angular and these other frameworks are trying to achieve different things. But I will give a very basic idea of why. With Angular, there is something that I like to call victory bias, and this also is with React, because a lot of businesses have been successful using React and Angular. We're not entirely clear if React and Angular are truly the best frameworks to actually use, right? It's not entirely clear. We can make a lot of comparisons between the frameworks, but it's not completely clear which one is actually the best to use. And also, the different use cases are going to be important. So my answer to that, why use Angular over something like Vue.js, which I really like Vue.js. I think there's a lot of features in Vue.js that I would love that the Angular team would put on, like the keep alive component. Not going to go into too much detail. I really like Vue.js. But the reason why Angular people use Angular over Vue.js is because of victory bias. We've just seen more companies use Angular and be successful with it. We've seen more companies use React and be more successful with React. So there's a lot of victory bias. I'm not entirely sure if Angular and React are actually better. And in future, I will make a video comparing all of them. And I would not like to make a statement on which framework I think is the best. I can tell you my favorite framework is just Vue.js, but I don't necessarily think it's the best or is the best for business, right? And I wouldn't really like to make a statement around that. So then the next thing I'd like to talk about is why we choose Angular over React. Because it's a bit simpler to talk about that. So you're a company, and so you let's say you get hired by a company, or you're a company who wants to choose Angular and React. What are some of the reasons why someone would go Angular over React? And we need to understand something very important about choosing Angular over React. You kind of hurt yourself a little bit if you're a company when you choose Angular, because unfortunately, and I've been in companies where we've had this discussion, there are a lot more React developers. If you look at React's npm download, it's a lot more than Angular's npm download. There's a lot more people who practice React. There's a lot more hobbyists doing React. There's a wider market of developers for React. So let's look at why some companies would rather choose React. Would choose Angular over React. So one of its Angular's main strengths is the fact that it's an opinionated framework. Okay, so it has an MVC like structure, and essentially it makes it simpler when the framework is opinionated. React, on the other hand, is more flexible, whereas Angular feels more restrictive. But by Angular being more restrictive, it simplifies the decision making, especially in large teams. So Angular's restrictiveness and it being very opinionated is a good thing, and why a business would choose it. For us developers who want to be creative and push boundaries, it might not be great, but if you want to work at a business, this would be very good for a business. Angular comes with TypeScript by default, and I cannot stress to you that this is an amazing thing or an amazing feature to have. The thing is, TypeScript saves, and this was what I was talking about earlier about Angular being very safe and secure. TypeScript saves a lot of companies a lot of headaches because if you just have your code running and you run into a runtime error, the website will crash for that user, and then we need to figure it out. When you have TypeScript, it reduces the amount of runtime errors you're going to get, and that means your website is just going to crash less, right? It's kind of a no-brainer. Having TypeScript is just amazing, and that's why companies would pick Angular over other frameworks in general. Angular also has a comprehensive CLI. The Angular CLI covers everything from testing and production build to linting and development. For example, the CLI, you can also create components. I think it's quite nice. React CLI offers fewer built-in features, making Angular's more complete solution for enterprise-level applications. In summary, in general, if you're building a large structured application or working with a big team, Angular's convention can save you time and reduce complexity. React, on the other hand, is better suited to projects where flexibility is prioritized over strict patterns. And that is just my view. Yeah, that's pretty much my view on Angular. Um, it's more for businesses. I, who am a hobbyist and I like building websites, I try to create a video game with Angular. It didn't go so well. So I would really recommend it. So in this final part, I'm just going to talk about, resources. So you can go to um, Angular Docs. It's a very good place where you can get your documentation about Angular. You can also go on Angular blogs. And yeah, so that has been pretty much my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Next time, I'm going to go through the actual Angular documentation. Hi guys, this is just a closing note. Thank you very much for watching my video. The audio wasn't as good. I'm going to be working on that. I hope you enjoyed it. Next time, I am actually going to go through the Angular documentation. If you have any questions, I will get back to you as soon as possible. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will get better at video making. Have a nice day.